Started. So, hi everyone. A lot of you coming from the Philippines, from Dave from Singapore. Welcome to the deep dive session of our Human Rights Strategy Workshop. We're glad to have all of you here with us today as we deep dive into climate justice, energy transition, the break free from plastic, and defense of environmental human rights campaigns. This workshop is being organized by the Pacific Network of Environment Defenders with Greenpeace and Break Free from Plastics. Just a few reminders for our audience, which will be presented in the next slide. For those in the conference room, please make sure your audio or microphones are on mute or turned off for the duration of the webinar if you will not be speaking. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to message your question into the Zoom chat. Our team will collate these questions and we will be the ones to ask the questions during the Q&A after all our resource persons have spoken. Feel free to interact with other viewers through the chat and join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag Asia Solidarity Lab. Of course, this event right now is being recorded. And lastly, if you want to get more information, copies of the presentations, and updates from the session organizers about the topics being discussed in this session, kindly fill out the CryptPad form with the bit.ly link shared on the screen, and it will also be shared in the chat box. CryptPad is a secure or private version of Google Drive or Google Forms, so it might take some time to load. By the way, I am Anna. I'm from the Asia Pacific Network of Environment Defenders, or APNED. We are a regional campaign solidarity network of individuals, CSOs, grassroots, and people's organizations that coordinates solidarity campaigns, capacity development, and policy engagement among grassroots and frontline defenders across the Asia Pacific. And I will be your host for today. Who was here in yesterday's session? Can you raise your hand among our participants here so we can have an idea? Okay, so we have Yana, Micah. Oh, a lot of us here actually were present in yesterday's session. It's great to have you here again at the Human Rights session. So like we did in yesterday's session, this is our favorite part. We request all participants and speakers to please turn on your videos. We will have our workshop class photo first while we are still fresh, you know. Of course, the pandemic has made physical gatherings challenging, but this will not keep us from forging new connections and expressing our solidarity wherever we are on the globe. So please, can you turn on your videos, and we will have our tech assistants put us all in gallery view. You can put on your biggest, or if you want your most grim and determined smiles, so we can have our class photo. Are we okay? I'm gonna check with the gallery view. Who's doing the screenshot? Okay, are we okay? So 1, 2, 3, smile. That's great. Next page, we have 3 pages. 1, 2, 3, smile. Next page. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. So thank you for the day 2 class photo. Without further ado, let us start with the workshop. So with yesterday's session, we heard the inspiring stories of different climate, energy transition, and environmental human rights activists from all over Asia. We heard about their motivations, their victories, their challenges and calls to raise the alarm for a better normal. Today, we'll be taking a deeper dive into these issues to allow us to explore further the basics of the climate justice, energy transition, break free from plastic, and defense of environmental human rights defenders campaigns, and efforts being done nationally and globally towards achieving a stable climate, environmentally sustainable, just, and a plastic-free world. We have 6 speakers with us this afternoon who come from an interestingly diverse set of backgrounds. We have 2 lawyers, 1 environmental biologist, 2 campaigners, and 1 peasant leader coming from 3 different countries. I am excited to share the virtual stage with our speakers who will be sharing their valuable insights and experience. So allow me to introduce our first speaker, since we're already over time. Our first speaker has been practicing law for more than a decade and runs a free legal aid clinic online. From her law firm background on general litigation, she came to Greenpeace Southeast Asia Philippines as its legal advisor and currently leads the Philippine legal team's Climate Justice and Liability Program, specifically working with the various stakeholders and employing creative strategies to mainstream climate justice in the consciousness of Filipinos and institutionalize it in the government system. She finished her law studies at San Beda University and Master in Development Management at the Asian Institute of Management, both as a full scholar and a consistent honor student. Without further ado, let's hear from Attorney Hasmina Paudak, who will be sharing her input on climate justice and solutions through climate litigations, the Philippine Human Rights Commission journey. Take it away, Hasmina.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Anna. A pleasant morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone, whichever time zone you are currently in. For my intervention, I will be speaking through the practical lens, primarily sharing with you climate justice in a nutshell through the lessons we've learned from our almost 6-year journey to hold carbon majors accountable for the climate-related harms in the Philippines in light of the current developments in the climate corporate accountability. Yes, we will be celebrating our 6th-year anniversary, fortunately or unfortunately, since the filing of the petition on September 22, 2015. My slides, please. Climate change is a global challenge that exacerbates underlying inequalities and injustices. Wealthy and more developed countries contributed the most emissions, yet the negative impacts of climate change are disproportionately borne by persons and communities already in the disadvantageous situations with the least ability to cope, like the Philippines, which suffers the most despite having historically contributed the least emissions. Thus, the call for climate justice, because how we respond to climate change today will define our future. Next slide, please. So what is climate justice? In a nutshell, it is actually seeking accountability from those who largely contributed to fueling the climate crisis and forced the rapid and just phase out of fossil fuels. Did you know that more than 69.8%, yes, 69.8% of global anthropogenic or human-induced carbon emissions were significantly caused by just 90 entities since 1751 through 2017. Yes, this was based on Richard Healy's breakthrough research, the Carbon Major Study. 50 of the 90 entities were investor-owned and were responsible for 21.4% of all anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions. Thus, we, Greenpeace Philippines, along with 13 other nonprofit organizations and 18 bold individuals, that is a total of 32 petitioners, filed a legal action against these investor-owned carbon polluting companies such as Shell, Chevron, Exxon, Total. You can see the logos of the respondents in my slide. But due to corporate mergers and acquisitions, the number of respondents was actually reduced to 47. Now, a favorite narrative that was utilized and echoed by these carbon polluters is that everyone is responsible for the effects of climate change. Thus, no one can be held accountable. This view, however, failed to consider the responsibilities and obligations of those who have contributed the most to this climate crisis and profited from it. Next slide, please. For those who aren't familiar with our legal action, briefly, it was a petition filed before the Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines by 32 petitioners against 47 carbon majors, requesting for an investigation of the responsibility of the carbon majors for human rights violations or threats thereof, resulting from the impacts of climate change. It was said the world's first during that time. Now, while we haven't received the Commission's final report, by the way, we just filed an ex parte manifestation motion for urgent resolution of the petition 2 months ago, or on June 11, before our Independence Day in the Philippines. We've already gained some substantial preliminary wins, specifically when the Commission confirmed that the clear role carbon majors have played in the anthropogenic climate change and its attendant impacts, and highlighted that corporations' obligations as business enterprises to do their part in mitigating climate change, including the responsibility to conduct climate change and human rights impacts assessments. Also, the Commission responded to some of our pleas, particularly when it launched its Climate Change Observatory last September 2020, mandating monitoring of human rights violations in the context of climate change and creating a repository of evidence that would be a very useful resource for the public in building their climate case or launching a new one. Since I was just given limited time to present, I will just share the 3 significant takeaways or lessons we've learned from our climate justice journey that could perhaps help shape current and future endeavors on corporate accountability. Next slide, please. Now, the first lesson, in the absence of an international treaty on business and human rights at the moment, using human rights law, in particular, human rights due diligence, enabled plaintiffs to articulate the specific obligations of defendants. The argument we made was that the respondents are acting unlawfully under the UN guiding principles as informed by international law and domestic law. We argued that the respondents have a legal responsibility to respect, including those proactive measures of the human rights of the Filipinos. Now, what is important to remember is that due diligence in the climate context should never be only about the process, but about the outcome of limiting warming to below 1.5 degrees Celsius and providing justice to communities. While the UNGPs are seen as soft law, we argue that they are instructive in defining the specific obligations of the respondent because they restate and codify existing international and national legal standards on human rights and business enterprises. This was affirmed actually in a recent case, milieu defense case against Shell, which our Dutch office is also co-plaintiff, particularly when the court noted that the UNGP constitute an authoritative and internationally endorsed soft law instrument which set out the responsibilities of states and business in relation to human rights. Now here, the court emphasized, which is very useful for the current and future climate cases, the affirmative and individual responsibilities of carbon majors, independent of governments and other parties in society. Again, the individual responsibilities of the carbon majors, explaining that their obligations apply both to actions or omissions, and that respecting human rights is not an optional responsibility for companies. It applies everywhere, regardless of the legal context, and it's not passive. Now, the second lesson is triangulating evidence and strategy to increase impact. While establishing climate science is imperative, triangulation of evidence is significant to sustain the process and prove your case. This means presenting 3 main pillars. We have our community witnesses, national experts, and international experts in the fields of climate science, law, policy, and research. Now, triangulation in strategy means treating our case not just a legal action, but complementing it with community or grassroots work, political work, and storytelling or campaigning. Community work is important to change mindsets and behavior. Political work supplements the legal case because there will always be limitations on the power of the commission or court hearing a particular case. And of course, storytelling and campaigning are powerful tools to elevate the discourse and change the narrative. Now, the final lesson is continuing the efforts to achieve substantial global impact. The national inquiry marks only the beginning of community-led efforts to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for human rights harms. Now it is up to everyone listening to us to carry the efforts forward based on today's circumstances. To underscore, cases can be brought forward against private actors not only on the basis of loss and damage or financial liability. To create systemic change through possible national law or policy changes, one route to go, which is gaining traction, is the human rights angle, particularly given the recent landmark win in milieu defense case against Shell. It further cemented our legal argument or strategy on using human rights lens in the context of climate change. As mentioned, the case puts to rest the question of whether the carbon majors have legal responsibilities with regard to the climate crisis. Climate polluting companies, their subsidiaries, and other entities in the supply chain have obligations independently of the state to prevent and redress human rights harms in the context of climate change. Now, fossil fuel producers can no longer shift the responsibility to the consumers. Also, fossil fuel companies are now more vulnerable to accountability efforts. Our legal action, together with the Milieu Defensive case and other related climate cases, has opened up the space for communities, lawyers, and scholars to consider how human rights should respond to fossil fuel companies' empty net zero commitments and misleading green advertising. Also, they can't possibly be used as yardstick on the responsibility of the fossil fuel industry and ultimately build the power of the communities to take legal action to protect their rights to safe climate and healthy environment. One of the reasons why we are currently here. Now, that will be all, Anna. Thank you for lending your ears. I would love to hear your thoughts during our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Attorney Hasmina, for that very comprehensive 10-minute talk. That was very inspiring. It introduced us to the concept of climate justice, to the concept of differentiated responsibilities between corporate and government polluters, between historical polluters and the climate vulnerable countries, and for sharing with us the 3 valuable lessons that you have with you through your experience in using the legal framework to seek accountability from corporate climate polluters. Thank you so much. If you felt inspired and motivated to demand action from your government, like what Attorney Hasmina did with the CHR, can you throw us a heart emoji? Our participants, can you throw us a heart emoji from your Zoom controls? Yes. The hearts are here to show us. Thank you so much for the hearts. It also reminds us that the call for climate justice, of course, comes from a place of heart, of love and passion. So thank you so much. I will now go to our second speaker. Our second speaker is a climate justice campaigner since 2009, who has previously worked for the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice before joining Greenpeace, where he is now working as the energy transition campaigner of Greenpeace Philippines. His advocacy focuses on climate and energy issues at the grassroots level and finding ways to help build the anti-coal campaign in the Philippines. He was also involved in policy reforms during Typhoon Yolanda rehabilitation of the Philippine government. He graduated from the De La Salle College of St. Benilde in 2008 with a degree in consular and diplomatic affairs. So we will now give the virtual floor to Kevin Yu, who will be giving us an overview on transitioning to renewable energy as a means to achieving climate justice. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Anna, for that introduction, and welcome everyone, and good day. So again, my name is Kevin Yu from Greenpeace Philippines. So I have this, like most of the speakers with me, this challenging task of presenting our very complex campaigns within 10 minutes. So bear with me. But with this presentation, I'll presenting a visual overview of what's about renewable energy transition and climate justice. I'll try to make it as simple as possible for everyone here in this forum. So I'll just share my screen. Just a moment. Can you see my presentation? Yes, all right. Okay. So I'll be presenting 4 graphs per slide. I have 3 slides all in all. So in this first graph, on the upper left side, you'll see pebbles. So basically that's fossil fuel. So this is about how energy is being generated. So historically, we've been using fossil fuels in many forms, from coal, natural gas, as the main source of our electricity in all parts of the world. Unfortunately, with the use of fossil fuels, it creates different forms of greenhouse gas emissions. So from the energy sector and even from the transport sector, these are one of the biggest contributors of greenhouse gas emitters. And these are mentioned by Attorney Hasmina a while ago as the carbon majors. So these are the big corporations that's been polluting historically, coming primarily from the transport and energy sector. But the main problem here is that the more greenhouse gas emissions that we produce, uh, the more hotter the planet will be. So that means uh, the the problem is not greenhouse gas emissions per se, but the excessive amount of greenhouse gas emissions we that came from human activities. Because naturally there is a greenhouse gas emissions in our planet, but the main problem here is that the excessive amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So if the planet heats up, of course we eventually have different forms of climate impacts. From In our country, we experience sea level rise, extreme typhoons, and uh, more frequency of typhoons again. And in other parts of us, there is different forms of climate impacts. But all in all, we're talking about how to mitigate it. Uh, at up to what level? So it was mentioned a while ago, 1.5 degrees. So this is the global threshold. So all actions should lead up uh, to this global target. So what is exactly the solution? So if we know that the problem is excessive greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sector, so the solution here is that we need to shift away from old technology. So it doesn't mean that we will upgrade technology. It's a change in technology. That's why there is a term called energy transition. We need to shift away from fossil fuel source of energy generation, such as coal, natural gas, or even diesel fuels, to renewable energy such as wind, solar energy. But keep in mind that there are other false solutions that's being presented that as a solution, such as clean clean coal technology, nuclear energy, what else? Even natural gas. But unfortunately, natural gas is actually fossil gas. It is still fossil fuel and it emits greenhouse gas emissions. And what is clear from science right now, especially when with the recent release of the IPCC, sorry for the abbreviation, it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, where they released a report. It's clear that we need to stop the use of fossil fuel facilities starting not 10 years from now, but now. We need to start within this decade to make that transition immediate in all parts of the world. And as you can see here on the lower left corner of the slide, you'll see a lot of people. These are actually world leaders who convened during the Paris Agreement, and this they have an agreement to, of course, to address the climate crisis. And one of the main solution for that is, of course, to reduce the use of carbon intensive technology such as fossil fuel, coal, and natural gas. And one of the targets that they have is the one that I mentioned earlier, the 1.5 degrees global threshold. And in order for the world to do that, we need to have 50% renewable energy by 2030 globally. So that's where the urgency comes from. Because if we go beyond this, if we did not reach this, it will be a worse scenario for all of us. And if you'd like to dig deeper on this, you can check the IPCC report where they presented a lot of evidence of the impacts and the different scenarios. I think they have 6 scenarios there that they presented, whether we can reach the 1.5 degrees threshold, what are the steps needed to be done. But what is clear is that we need to stop the use of fossil fuels, uh, do the energy transition now, not 10 years from now, but within this decade, and to reach the 50% renewable energy as a mid-year target before eventually having a net zero emission uh, from the energy industry and from other industry as well by 2050. So all of our efforts should be aligned to this. And the people here in this Paris Agreement have this commitment of doing what we call the nationally determined contribution. So their countries have their own commitments in reaching this target. So it is within our best interest to know our NDCs from our countries, and of course, to make it more ambitious to reach this global target. Uh, to, of course, protect our lives, protect our communities, and protect our planet. And with this, of course, we need to connect this the energy transition work or campaign, no, to climate justice. So it's not just about doing the solution. We're talking about what is just, no, what is for example for the communities, what is just for the workers, no, and what is just for our society. For the Philippines, for example, what is just for us is of course to demand accountability, demand climate justice from the carbon majors, and for and of course we need these carbon majors, aside from paying up uh, for the damages that we've experienced. They need to take the lead in solving the solution and in pushing for the solution. Because if we don't include these companies and even countries, the historical emitters and the biggest emitters, it will be a problem, because the climate crisis is of course a global problem, and we need all the major players to be involved in this. So in the context of climate justice, we need to have them involved in pushing for the right solutions, in pushing for climate justice. And in the context of energy transition, there's a discussion of just transition for workers, because some are talking about how fast can this happen, what will happen to the workers of the previous industry. So we need to discuss this and to plot out a viable and inclusive transition plan for these workers as well, because it will be difficult for them because they are trained in a different way, and they need to be retooled and retrained in being part of a sustainable uh, industry such as the renewable energy sector. And of course, we need to align this, the call for energy transition and climate justice towards a better normal. How can we transform our society? We're not just simply talking about shifting technologies here and pushing for what is the right solutions based on science, but we are talking about how can we transform our society towards a better normal where people can live with dignity, our children and their children can live with a safer planet and a sustainable society, that our human rights will be protected. So with that, I will be ending my presentation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin. Sorry for that. I think my connection got lost or disconnected for a while.
Oh, really?
So, but I think I just got back in the nick of time right
All
after
right.
you. Right. So thank you so much for the very informative and very visual input, Kevin. As you can see, we have a lot of students, young students with us, and I think this is a very eye-opening input for them because you explained some of the science behind climate change, some of the science behind excessive greenhouse gas emissions, and of course the importance of the shift to renewable energy to meet our 1.5 degree target. It's a concept for our kids known as climate mitigation. So he also introduced to us the concept of nationally determined contributions towards meeting our climate targets. Of course, if you're interested to know more about Kevin's input about renewable energy transition, can you give us a like emoji so that we'll know that if we're going to come back to you? Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. So now that you have tackled the basics of the climate justice energy transition, we will now go into the Break Free from Plastic campaign. So our third speaker is an Indonesian environmental biologist. She currently works as Program Development Manager at Ecoton. It is an NGO that develops advocacy and community awareness programs to promote sustainable watershed management and environmental pollution prevention, particularly in her area in the Brantas River Basin in East Java, Indonesia. This is an area that has been polluted by single-use plastic waste, especially disposable diapers, sachets, and plastic bags. So to learn more about her break free from plastic advocacy, let's give it to Ms. Daru Rooney. Hi, Daru.
Hi, Anna. So I will share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm so happy that I can join the event today. So good afternoon from Indonesia. I am Daru Rini. I'm the founder and coordinator of Zero Waste Cities program at Ecoton. So Ecoton is NGO. Actually, it's the ecological observation and wetlands conservation. So in short, we call it Ecoton. So it was established in year 2000, and our goal is to prevent or to preserve a healthy wetland ecosystem in Indonesia. And also we want to inherit a good and healthy environment for our future generation. So are you ready to join me to break free from plastic? Yeah. So I live in Gersik. Gersik is a city in East Java, and there is Brantas River, is the main river in East Java that drain to 17 cities in East Java, and it become the main source of our drinking water supplies, agriculture, irrigation, hydropower, fisheries, and tourism. But unfortunately, plastic is polluting Brantas River and its estuary. So this is the situation in the estuary of Brantas, where we bring some youth volunteers to conduct beach cleanup. And Ecoton conducts several programs to prevent this plastic pollution from getting worse. So we using a 3-activity approach. It's research, education, and advocacy. So we're doing this by building collective movement, especially with youth and women. So there are 5 causes of the plastic pollution in Indonesia. First is lack of waste management service coverage. So in Indonesia, only 35% of waste, household waste that managed properly. So there are 65% of waste that are mismanaged. That's why we can see if you visit Indonesia, this situation is commonly seen along the roadside, along the riverbank, and also at the beach. So the second source of this problem, also 72% of citizens don't have concern of waste problem. So lack of awareness from the citizen about the environmental problem and plastic pollution. only 28%, according to government survey, that citizens have concern about their waste problem in their area. And the third cause is plastic waste composition has increased significantly from 9% in 1995 to 20% in 2020. So 76% of the plastic that leak to the environment is single-use flexible plastic packaging. That's why it becomes our priority to push the government to control or to reduce the use of single-use plastic, especially sachet plastic bag, diapers, and styrofoam. And the fourth cause is lack of enforcement of EPR, extended producer responsibility by the plastic producer, especially for the non-recyclable plastics such as diapers, sachets, styrofoam. The producer must take responsibility to take back their packaging waste and treat in a safe way. And the most important, they have to redesign their product and packaging to become only compostable and recyclable products. And the last cause, the fifth cause, is lack of law enforcement in Indonesia. So dumping trash into river, roadside is very common practice by people in Indonesia, as well as open burning to get rid of their household waste. It's very common, especially in rural area where there is no waste management service provided by the government. So in the Break Free from Plastic campaign, we regularly conduct beach cleanup, and also we conduct research on microplastic pollution in the water, in the fish stomach, seafood, human feces, and this microplastic has been contaminated our food chain. So we found seafood from Madura Strait has contained microplastic in their stomach, and even chicken egg contain dioxin 70 times higher than the safe limit. It's caused by the plastic waste burning, and it was the imported plastic waste from developed country that import by the paper mills, but it contained a lot of plastic waste contaminants, and it's non-recyclable. So people see it as a cheap fuel. They burn it in the tofu factory to produce tofu, and the ash contaminated the soil, and the free-range chicken feed on the soil, contaminated soil. That's why the chicken egg contain dioxins. And we also monitor the wastewater from the plastic recycling factory, paper, and other industry that's discharged into Brantas River. And we found that all wastewater from paper mills contain microplastic. So in this campaign, we recruit youth volunteers to join beach cleanup and conduct brain audit, and to join campaign to push government make regulation to ban single-use plastic, and to provide proper waste management facilities for the rural area, and promote zero waste lifestyle as the new trend in youth community. So now it's growing, yeah, the youth movement in Break Free from Plastic. And we also filed a lawsuit to the sachet producer. So there are three biggest sachet producer in Brantas River. It's Wings Group, Indofood, and Unilever. So we conduct a demonstration or protest at their main office in Surabaya City and bring their sachet back to their office. And we also file lawsuit to the company, and it's now still ongoing process at the court. We also lobby the diaper producer. This is Unicharm CEO, yeah, or the factory staff that come to visit our office, because we keep on blowing up the news about the river that polluted by the Mami Popo diapers. And finally they came to our office, and they want to to learn or to know what they can do to stop this diaper pollution. So they came to our office, and finally they support to provide a diaper container for the people live in Brantas riverbank. So this is the youth action, youth movement to protest on the plastic waste import from USA. So this is in front of US Consular Office in Surabaya. So we bring the plastic trash that has been smuggled in the paper bills, and this is also youth activist Nina. She sent a letter for the President Joe Biden asking USA to stop exporting their plastic trash to Indonesia. So the key message for my presentation, yeah. So first is youth has power as change maker, and youth will inherit the earth. So youth should fight for your own future environment to prevent further destructive exploitation by present generation. And youth should lead the plastic-free movement in their own area. And we need to push plastic waste trade ban from developed country for recycling or for dumping. Each country should manage their own waste because we already have our own problem with our own domestic waste. Recycling is very difficult, it's very expensive, and maybe will add more pollution to the environment. So each country has to manage their own waste. And the plastic exporting country should build a model, should become a good example how to conduct recycling, and not to ship their trash for recycling in developing country who doesn't have the capacity to even treat their own waste. And all countries should avoid thermal technology in waste treatment. Maybe Miko will talk about this more detail. And the last is the enforcement of EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Regulation, is very urgent, yeah, especially for a multinational company like Unilever, Coca-Cola, and etc. So they have to redesign product to limit production of non-recyclable disposable product, to provide collection system, and to increase recycling plastic content in their product, and to clean up the plastic leakage in the environment from their product and packaging. So I think that's all I can share for you guys. So I will be happy to have discussion later with you about this break free from plastic movement. Over to Anna.
Thank you so much, Daru. It's 10 minutes, but a lot of information for all of us, especially the youth, the kids we have here. It's a call for the kids, the youth, who will be the new generation will bring forward the Break Free from Plastics campaign. So her overview she shared with us the plastic pollution problem from the lens of her organization. Of course, you can see that from her presentation, plastics do not just contaminate the water, do not just contaminate the soil, but also our bodies. So we really have to break free from plastic. Also inspired by the collective actions of our brothers and sisters from Eastern Java, and especially the youth, who were really very inspiring to see youth in action at a very young age. So who wants to break free from plastic? Can you raise your hand? Show us a raise hand emoji. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So now that we've learned more about the Break Free from Plastic campaign, a lot of raised hands. Thank you so much. Now that we've learned more about the Break Free from Plastic campaign, let's dive deeper into other solutions on plastic pollution. So for this particular deep dive, we have Gaia's Asia Pacific Regional Program Coordinator, who is currently based here in Quezon City in the Philippines. He has worked with various development and environmental organizations in the past 15 years, focusing on waste management, urban settlements, project management, and fundraising. He studied political science at the Ateneo de Manila University and the University of the Philippines. So allow me to introduce our fourth speaker, Miko Alino. Take it away, Miko.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for enabling my screen share. So thanks, Anna, thanks, Daru and Kevin and Hasmina for joining this panel. Not sure where's the music coming, so I'm hearing just a moment. Not sure where's the audio's coming. I'll just try to switch to. Okay, I'll just try to uh, make do with this. So I'm hearing a looping audio. I'm not sure if it's coming from my end. I hope it's not disturbing your end. So I'll try and make do with this. So anyway, so I'll be doing a presentation about plastic solutions, and I left it with a question mark and started with this comic strip from Changing Markets Foundation. So last year they released a report called Talking Trash. They wanted to expose this industry playbook that we've seen. We actually see this even in the carbon majors playbook, but we also see this in a lot of plastic producers as well. And we wanted to, in a way, not only show you the different types of solutions that, for example, Ecoton and other organizations within the Break Free Plum Plastic movement are doing. We also wanted to share some of the projects or things that we're seeing being done by FMCGs, businesses, and governments. And this somehow invites us to actually do critical thinking, and I'll show you a tool later on how do we, in a way, assess what types of solutions are actually real and what types are, in a way, are just greenwashing. So a few years ago, we've seen a study posting that China, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and so on as the top polluting countries. And later on, it was revised, saying that we need to, in a way, recalibrate the list and include countries that are actually producing a lot of waste, especially those that are shipping waste to other countries like Indonesia. So in that a revised list, we've seen the US, Japan, Korea also joining this top polluter list. And we've seen a lot of initiatives, pledges, commitments from countries, from producers, from like-minded organizations. They wanted to, in a way, clean the plastic leakage that we see in our oceans and our waterways. And here are just some snippets or screen grabs from different news articles from years ago. So single-use plastic, for example, it has become a household name. It's something that we already equate to disposable, something that we dispose because it can't be recycled, it can't be composted. We've also seen reports about the ocean cleanup project. It was initiated by Boyan Slat. The idea was to clean up the gyres that are full of plastic waste. And I understand they started this project 2 years ago. They received a lot of funds, but eventually cleaning up the ocean is not simple. It's not simple as just scooping plastic waste out of the water or out of the gyres. And I last time I heard is they in a way recalibrated their work, and they wanted to focus on waterways. We've also seen a lot of businesses, they actually banded together, like break free from plastic. So we've seen groups like Procter and Gamble, Unilever, Nestle, Shell, Dow Chemical. They formed this alliance. So it's called Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and they also, in a way, wanted to, in a way, try to clean up the waste that we know that they have also created or produced. And we've also seen governments making different pledges. It was started by China. We've seen China a few years ago in 2017. They've shut their doors. They're no longer accepting plastic waste that are being exported by countries like the US. So, and that in a way started this chaotic scene where these exporting countries, they're looking for other places where they can dump their waste. Unfortunately, when then China closes doors, others in a way try to accommodate them. So like Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and so on. So even though these countries were already burdened with a lot of plastic waste, they are in a way struggling further with this more waste dumping coming from different countries. And I think we've seen this a lot of stories or a lot of updates about plastic reduction roadmaps. We've seen news reports about having a global plastic treaty. There are also developments about updating the Basel Convention so that we can include plastic waste or classify it as a waste that cannot be easily traded or shipped to other countries. And we've also seen businesses trying their best in a way to project that recycling is the option or is the solution. And it's you can take a look at this report from Reuters recently. For instance, it's called the recycling myth. It's you can look at it online. It exposes some of the recycling or the solutions, putting air quotes on that, that businesses in a way promoted years ago, saying that these are the silver bullets to addressing our plastic pollution problem. And because of these reports coming from Reuters, the one from TerraCycle, coming from Changing Markets Foundation, these are all expotes, so showing that recycling is not enough. Recycling is a myth. It will not help us solve our recycling or our plastic pollution problem. And what it only does is, in a way, delays the problem. It actually creates more, complicates things, because we have to deal with other byproducts such as maybe fly ash or bottom ash when we use it, when we use plastic waste, for instance, to produce electricity. We also have to deal with microplastics, for example, when we try to convert or process our plastic waste into textiles. So we are just, in a way, delaying the inevitable, which is the plastic leakage that will still end up in our environments. And I'd like to share you this tool from Trash Hero, a member of the Break Free from Plastic movement. So they created this, what they call a fall solutions tool. So it would help us, hopefully maybe some of the participants here would like to maybe use our critical thinking powers and help us assess if the solutions that are being presented to us are actually real solutions or they are actually greenwashing. And in this chart, it shows that you can start with, for example, 10 points. And if you actually end up with 10 points after answering these questions, then yes, the one that you're actually proposing, it's a real solution. But there are other pieces or initiatives that I think, or we think that it would be still be useful, but not really the perfect one. It could be what we call transitionary solutions. So, for example, there are startups that are in a way trying to delay the use of plastic waste. Instead of putting them in landfills, you put them and try to make it into bricks. It's not the real solution, it's just a stopgap solution, but in a way it delays the inevitability of actually burning it and using it as energy, or trying to dispose of it with more harmful pollutants. And I think what's important when we try to assess these solutions is reimagine a world that we want to have. And in this illustration, I'd like to end this. This is from Zero Waste Europe. This is what we want in our world when we try to address plastic pollution. We want a world where there's a conglomeration of zero waste initiatives, repairs, deposit return schemes, reusables, refills, composting, and so on. And if you'd like to hear more about these initiatives, of course, take a look at the tool that I've showed you earlier. It's very useful to assess and so that we'll learn more about these greenwashing initiatives, and also take a look at what real solutions look like. We have a publication here from my organization, the Zero Waste Master Plan, and some of the policies that you've seen maybe done by governments. You can take a look at the readings down below. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miko. Can everyone give him a virtual emoji? Thank you so much for sharing with us the range of solutions and actions that are being done to address plastic pollution, and of course, filtering for us, or being our virtual filter to determine which ones are meaningful and which ones are not, and for sharing with us a very useful tool which we can assess, which we can use to assess or differentiate between the real solutions and the band-aid solutions. So please, I can see a lot of comments, commendations. Please keep them going inside the chat box. If you have questions, do feel free to share it with us as well. Or if you have links, like, thank you for the link, Miko, I can see it in the chat box, for further readings or further studies that you can do. Thank you so much. So for our next deep dive, we will learn more about the plight of what we call environmental human rights defenders, or for short, we call them environment defenders or ENVI defenders. So we will be hearing this from Chris Chavez. Chris is a member of the Defend Panay Network, which is a broad alliance of indigenous people's rights advocates, church people, environmental organizations, academics, and human rights advocates. The Defend Panay Network is united in the call for an end to the ongoing attacks by state or government agents, such as extrajudicial killings and other human rights violations against activists and environmental defenders in the island of Panay in central Philippines. This campaign is integrated with the Philippines-wide Stop the Killings campaign. So to learn more about their campaign, let's hear it from Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Anna. Hello, everyone. I am so grateful that I've been given this opportunity to share with you our situation as environmental and human rights defenders. I hope we're all in the best of health today. Again, my name is Roque Cruz Chavez. I'm old now, at 54 years old. I am a peasant organizer, and an environmental and human rights defender, and a member of the Defend Panay Network. I will share with you one story of extrajudicial killing that has actually been happening under the present administration of President Duterte. This is the Tumandok Indigenous People Massacre that happened last December 30, 2020. At around 4 in the morning that day, 25 houses in the hinterlands of central Panay were invaded by combined forces of the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police, supposedly to serve 28 search warrants. At daybreak, 9 men were found dead inside their homes, while 16 others were arrested on the basis of weapons and grenades planted in their houses, and 9 communities were left grieving in shock and in shock at the brutality of the attacks. No? Those killed and arrested were community leaders and members of the indigenous peoples group, the Tumandok indigenous people. The 9 men murdered were also leaders of their political organization, the Indigenous Peasants in Defense of Land and Life, which was, of course, most vocal and consistent in the Tumandok people's struggle against the militarization of their ancestral domain and the incursions of destructive projects like the Halao River Megadam project. The leaders of Tumandok and their organization were tagged as terrorists by the government before they were killed. In the aftermath of the attacks, advocates of the Tumandok people were also attacked. A barangay chieftain who was a stand witness to the planting of evidence was murdered on February 28, 2021. And on March 3 of this year also, one of the legal counsels of the imprisoned Tumandok were stabbed repeatedly and left for dead by unknown assailants. His laptop and case files taken. Today, the reign of terror still dominates the Tumandok villages, especially those categorized as rebel-infested or communist-infiltrated areas. Here, a de facto martial law actually exists, where people's mobility is either monitored, surveilled, or scrutinized, and even their food production activities are construed to support the so-called terrorist movement. And enforced hunger now is taking its toll already on these villages. Also, pressures from the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-LCAP, together with certain local government units and government agencies also step up, while threats and intimidation are usually done by the Philippine Army of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. They frighten the people with the still fresh December 30 Tumandok massacre, but this could also happen to them who remain members, leaders, supporters, or sympathizers of the CPP and NPA, and they had their names cleared once at the police stations or at the military camps. As a result, hundreds of Tumandok and even non-Tumandok people have been forced to clear their names as told. They are now what we call forced and fake surrenderers. Regarding some updates on the case, so those 16 Tumandok who were arrested were charged with the violation of the Republic Act 10591 on the law on firearms and ammunition, and Republic Act 9516 on the legal and unlawful possession of firearms, ammunition, or explosives. Colonel Enrique Ancheta, the chief of the Regional Crime Laboratory who led the conduct of paraffin test on the 9 Tumandok cadavers, disclosed its result in the media, and he found out that of the 9 cadavers, 7 were negative of powder burns. But being honest to himself, earned the ire of his superior in the regional leadership of the Philippine National Police as he was relieved. And later, I heard that he was charged of not wearing proper uniform. Of the 16 arrested Tumandok, 6 entered into the plea bargain agreement due to constant pressure. 5 had filed motions to quash the search warrants. 1 and now got their cases dismissed, while 4 were released on bail, and the other 1 proceeded to trial. And due to the rising demand to investigate the bloody incident, the regional command of the Philippine National Police was compelled to conduct its motu proprio investigation on its 14 CIDG, or the Criminal Investigation and Detection Group of the Philippine National Police. They are all officers involved in that December 30 synchronized military and police operations. But the regional leadership absolved all of them, 14. A lot of leaders and members of NGOs and CSOs here in Panay have been red tagged. In my case, I was red tagged in December 2018. My face was put along with others in a tarp hung along the sidewalks of the city. I also found groups of unidentified persons tracking my whereabouts in several peasant and fisher folk communities I would visit. Obviously, I've been hiding for how many months now? Or more than a year now. Finally, we demand for the withdrawal of military troops from the Tumandok villages. We also demand for the conduct of an independent, impartial, accurate investigation and swift investigation on the massacre, and hold all those involved accountable for the crime of murder and be to jail. Further, we demand for the release of the illegally arrested Tumandok indigenous people, including all those who entered the plea bargain agreement, as we believe they did it while under duress, and the release of all political prisoners in the country. And lastly, even if its construction has started already, the Halaor Dam project should be stopped. Thank you, everyone.
Right. So thank you, Chris, for sharing with us the very deadly threats being faced by environmental defenders. He shared with us what happened to the Tomandok indigenous peoples in Panay who were opposed. The video he showed of the Halaur Dam was one of the development projects that were fiercely opposed by the Tomandok tribe. And what happened earlier this year where they were massacred. And even Mang Chris right now is facing threats to his life. So really, being an environmental defender is a very serious commitment, but we are inspired by the stories of people like Chris, who show us that despite the threats to his own life, the threats to his community, they continue with the struggle, and they are determined and unfazed. So thank you so much for that. Give us a like emoji if you were inspired by Mang Chris' story. And if you'd like to continue, despite the threats, despite the harassment, to stand in solidarity with environment defenders. So thank you so much. For our next and the final speaker, and of course, as the saying goes, we always save the best for last. He is the legal counsel on campaigns and actions at Greenpeace International in Amsterdam, where he has worked since 2014. He specializes in climate change and human rights litigation from Norway to the Philippines. He is a barrister and practiced as an attorney at the New York Bar. For 5 decades, he has focused on major human rights litigation, environmental justice, domestic and international criminal law, and post-conflict resolution. He is a member of the international team of barristers at Garden Court Chambers in London. He strives to hold corporations and governments to account for the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable climate for all. We are honored to have with us today Mr. Richard J. Harvey. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Anna, and thanks to everybody who's been involved in. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And thanks to everybody who's been involved in putting together this incredible 3 days that you're conducting there. My first slide starts with the words strategic litigation opportunities. Before we get into law stuff, I just want to pay tribute to Chris and to all of the environmental defenders who put their lives on the line. Somebody like me as a lawyer feels acutely humble looking at the struggles that Chris has been involved in, and that all of those he's been working with, people who have not given their lives, they've had their lives stolen from them for staying in that struggle. And so I just want to ask everybody right now, are you angry yet? Are you ready to fight yet? Because there is a big fight ahead of us. As it says at the bottom of this slide, people have rights and states have duties. And much as they may try to pretend they don't, companies do have responsibilities. So what is this strategic litigation thing? It's not just a tactic to win a case in a courtroom. You've seen the pictures that we saw from Indonesia of the women and the youth cleaning up. Pretty ironic, yeah? The women and the youth are left to do the cleaning up. We're talking about strategic litigation being a human rights-based approach to winning not just cases, but struggles. The struggle for the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. It means the right to life, the right to family life, the right to clean air and water, to sustainable agriculture and fisheries. So what are the levers that can be used. Strategic litigation exerts a bottom-up pressure on governments or corporations to mitigate, adapt, or compensate for losses resulting from climate change. It seeks to influence policy decisions with climate change implications. And when we talk about strategic litigation opportunities, where are these opportunities? It's a question of selecting and bringing the right kind of case to court with the aim of creating broader changes in society. So not just getting the judge to rule in your favor, but getting changes that are going to affect society for our children and our unborn generation. So it's not just a lawsuit, it's part of an overall advocacy campaign to raise awareness on an issue that promotes the rights of disadvantaged groups who are failed by their governments and exploited by these corporations. The legal strategy depends on which jurisdiction you're in. Some places, lawsuits can last a lifetime, great for the lawyers, but it doesn't do too much for getting a result. Is a judge actually the right answer? Maybe you need to be going to the Human Rights Commission, as we have done in the Philippines, and getting them to set the standards by which legislation should be enacted by governments and judges should rule in the courtroom. Could we switch to slide 2, please? So what are the aims of strategic litigation? They are holding governments and corporations to account. Those 4 figures that we see here are from left to right, and I apologize if I get people's names badly pronounced. Krishna Ariola, one of the leaders behind Bacolod's strong environmental movement and lead convener of the Youth for Strike for Climate in the Philippines. Fred de la Cruz, a fisherman, comes all the way from Bataan to represent fisher folks in his community and across the country, demanding justice from Shell. Fisher folk and coastal communities are among those particularly vulnerable to the impact of the climate emergency. Then Karina De Losa, a mother who's been part of the movement against fossil fuels since 2014, she experienced the health impacts of coal plants. She's standing up to Shell for her children's future. And Francis Mikmik Talatayod, chairperson of StepGen, a youth group from Marikina City, who stands in front of the headquarters of Shell, he witnessed the dead bodies on the streets in the afternoon and the aftermath of Typhoon Ketsana Ondoy. These are just some of the people who are standing up to hold governments and corporations to account. What are the essential components of a strategic litigation? Well, first of all, it has to have merit, strong facts, solid science, sound legal analysis, and authentic support by the people. It must be professional. It's got to have sufficient legal capacity to frame the issues and see it through to the end to achieve its objectives. It's no good just saying, oh, we filed a lawsuit. Phew, now we've run out of money to pay for lawyers, or we haven't actually got too much support out there in the public. You don't file the lawsuit unless you've already engaged with your supporters, engaged politically with your communication strategy, with your mobilization strategy, and then you go into court. And then you use the lawsuit to empower local groups, indigenous peoples, communities, to tell their stories, to get them out there, to tell their stories of injustice and to put the facts on the record. Because these lawsuits can be a game changer. You change the rules of the game. You compel governments and corporations to protect the climate, the people, and the ecology. Can we move to slide 3, please? So the impacts of pollution, of climate change, they are what we call transboundary impacts. In other words, they don't recognize the boundaries between states. What is produced in one country has huge impacts in another. And the transboundary impacts of climate change require a transboundary impact of strategic litigation. We need to create legal precedents to inspire other countries to do the same. A domino effect, if you will. It's already happening in Europe and in Asia and in the US and in Central and South America. We're taking people to court, we're taking governments and corporations to court in order, for instance, Switzerland, climate senior women with an average age of 75 are taking their government to the European Court of Human Rights because they couldn't get a hearing on what the government's responsibilities should be to protect them from the premature deaths caused by climate change. In Norway, the youth and climate activists are taking their government to court. 95% of the Norway's impact on the environment from the oil and gas it produces, 95% of the emissions are felt abroad, not at home. So their government and their state-controlled oil major denies all responsibility for that. Again, we're going to the European Court of Human Rights. The Portuguese youth team have filed a case against 33 countries in Europe for violating their human rights. So that's the transboundary impact we're looking at. And it's not just against governments, but it's against transnational corporations, holding them to account in the wealthy countries which make the most money, not just in the poorer countries that suffer the most harm. So we go to the Human Rights Commission, as in the Philippines. Already Hasmina has mentioned the Milieu Defensie, that's the environmental defense company, NGO in the Netherlands, against Shell, where Shell has been ordered to reduce its climate impact internationally, worldwide, not just in the Netherlands. And there's another court, perhaps the most important court of all, the Court of Public Opinion, the court which challenges the greenwashing that fossil fuel corporations are given licenses to lie and manipulate with false promises. You've heard them all telling you, oh, we're going to be net zero by 2050. What does net zero mean? Oh, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. How? By buying carbon credits. It's a bit like saying, okay, I've got 16 credit cards, and each of them I owe money on and I haven't paid it. I know I'll get just the one big credit card and put them all on there, and then I'll tell the other 16, don't worry, I've cleared your debt. No, these debts don't just go away by paying them off with money. And on slide 4, please. We all hear about these wonderful terms like SDGs and ESGs, and we're learning new acronyms every day. Well, ESGs are environmental, social, and corporate governance. Environmental, social, and governance. In other words, what holds a firm corporation's collective conscientiousness for social and environmental factors. 10 years ago, corporate liability for climate change, they did laugh in our faces. They said, that's just a theory. You're never going to get corporations held liable for climate change. Today, strategic climate litigation is forcing governments, businesses, and insurers to assess, disclose, and mitigate risks. Losing in court may still be a win in the court of public opinion, because the polluter may not lose his government's license, but he can lose his investor's license, his insurance risk license, and his social license. So, together, we can make climate justice happen. We must, because our children and future generations depend on us not letting them get away with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. But it's a very good way to end our very strong panel. I can see applauses coming from our audience, virtual applauses. Thank you so much for showing us that any one of us, as shown in the pictures, from students, fisher folks, mothers, can stand up for our rights to a healthy, safe, and clean world. And it's not just for us, but for future generations, for our children and our children's children. We have to act now, as Kevin has already mentioned earlier. The time is now. Uh, Richard also showed us the intersection between people's movements and different legal strategies and arenas that we can use to demand climate accountability and climate justice. So power lies truly in the people. It's a great takeaway would be that it is through our collective action, whether it be in our schools for the students, in our communities, in our countries, even across regions and across continents. Through our collective action, can we only affect meaningful change? So let's give a very big heart emoji. I don't know if you can make it big for all of us here. Uh, as we pledge our commitment to act now, for whether it be for climate justice, for the Break Free from Plastics campaign, but of course for a clean, healthy, safe environment, not only for us, not only for the youth that we have with us here, but for future generations. We don't need the likes of Elon Musk to take us to Mars. Uh, we need to start cleaning up our act now, right? So to end our panel, we now go into the Q&A portion or the question and answer portion of our program. So far, I don't see any questions. If do you have any specific questions for our panel, kindly put it in the chat box. Are there any questions? All I can see are commendations. Everyone is really impressed. They sending their commendations to our very strong, very inspiring, very informative panel. Questions to our students? I see a lot of, right, as Pat was saying, a lot of kids here. Do you have any questions? None? Okay, so we get one question from Kyle. Are we gonna get justice for our climate someday? Okay, who wants to answer that?
I can go first.
Who wants to answer that among Okay.
That was a very good question, Kyle. I think with the presentations that we have, we are very hopeful that there will be climate justice. But again, it is not our individual responsibility. We have to disabuse our minds with that. We have to demand accountability, not only to our governments, but to the companies, as mentioned earlier by Richard Harvey. So we can achieve climate justice if we act on it, and we say act on it now. Now means no opportunity wasted. Over.
The only thing I would add to that is that the struggle for justice is a constant struggle. It doesn't start or stop on any particular day. It's all of our lives. That's why I'm still in the struggle, and I hope I've got a few more years to do it.
Okay. I'll go. Does anyone have? Do any of our panelists have anything to add? I got lost for a moment there. Sorry. Next question from Aisel. What is your response to people who don't believe in the power of protests and activism? Who wants to answer that first?
Yeah, I think I want to answer.
Go,
first.
Daddy.
Yeah. Yeah, there are people that still don't care, or not support activism. But I think we just keep going on. We just keep on moving with our own passion, yeah, with our passion. And still we have to bring or to invite more people to join our movement. When there's people don't want to support us, it's better for us to just leave them and find another one. So we don't have to spend our time, yeah, when they're still, when we know that it's very difficult to convince them. So yeah, we just find another one that want to join our movement. But we have to keep optimistic, you know, because if we have good intention, we have to be sure that the universe will help us. So we just keep on going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Daru. Does anyone want to add anything?
Anna?
Go ahead.
Yes, I think it is still a big challenge for us, no? To keep people understand the cause of activism, what it is all about, and what would be activism bring forth, no? In effecting a sound in the as a society. I think it is a challenge for us to keep people aware of their rights, and I think that question is just about out of being not getting involved, no? In the people's movement towards a better society. And
Thank you, Chris. Richard?
Could I just add, thank you. There's a very, very sinister attempt being made by all of these corporations to say, it's your responsibility. You've got to sort this all out. And that is very depressing for people. It's very destabilizing. It makes people think, oh, I can't deal with this. My life is too complicated already. Yeah, all of our lives are too complicated already. And it isn't your personal responsibility. Yes, there's something we can each do, but the best thing we can do is get together, band together, and take the fight together. Don't waste too much of your breath trying to convince somebody who doesn't want to be convinced. Show them by your example that you can do something and inspire them to do something too. Not easy, but we all believe it's worth a fight. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Richard. Does any one of our panelists want to chime in before I go? Okay, I'm going to the next question. This is for Daru from Dave. Beach and park cleanups are getting popular here in Singapore. However, I see this is as a never-ending story. Why should we clean up the mess that others make? We're asking from the expert, how do beach cleanups help to solve the plastic crisis?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yes, I understand. Yeah, clean up activity will not solve the plastic crisis. We have to handle this problem from the source, because right now the industry produce too much plastic and we don't have capacity. Many countries, yeah, don't have capacity to treat this, to treat the plastic. From all the plastic produced since 1960, only 9% that have been recycled. So about 90% is still there somewhere in our environment, and many are leak into the environment. So the cleanup is only, will not solve the plastic crisis, but it's a way for us to identify what are the type of plastic waste that the most polluting our environment, and that can be uh, our beginning to start doing a campaign to reduce that type of plastic trash, and also to do brand audit so we know what are the producers that produce too many plastic that polluting our environment, and we will do campaign to push them to take responsibility to clean the trash that polluting our environment. So actually, brand beach cleanup is not solution. It's just a tool for us to understand the problem of our plastic crisis. So the real solution is we have to ban single-use plastic, problematic plastic that cannot be recycled or cannot be composted, yeah, in natural environment. So beach cleanup it's not the solution to the plastic, but it's important for us to understand the source of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Daru. We have a question coming in from the CRIPPAT survey. It says, how do we bring climate justice mainstream in public discussions? Would like to go first? The question, I think, is how do we mainstream climate justice? Kevin? Sorry, I saw you unmute your microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, I was waiting for Hasmina, but if I may, yeah. Yeah, I think I guess like similar to other issues that we'd like to raise in terms of awareness. I think it needs to be front and center in terms of our educational effort. So I know there are many groups who are integrating climate change in the curriculum. But then again, we need also to broaden the discussion and to dig deeper and to really discuss the root causes of the problem and how does the climate justice lens present a solution in the problem. Because one of the challenges now is that climate change is just being discussed at the surface level only. It doesn't really dig deeper on in terms of the solutions, who are accountable to the climate crisis, and what are the urgent steps that needs to be done. So I think that's one thing that can be done. But I know there are many efforts that are as effective as well. And again, we need to be consistent with our messaging as well. We need to consistently mention climate justice in all our opportunities to discuss climate change and even environmental issues as well, because the climate crisis is all encompassing in many other social issues that we are experiencing right now. Over.
Perhaps, Anna, I can add to what Kevin has said. I think an example really is our case. We tried to use the power not of the law, not only of the law, through litigation. It is one way of mainstreaming it, because usually if there is a case, words circulate, and you can not only just have you will gain specific outputs or probably policy changes that could help to have systemic changes in our country. Another one is, as I've mentioned earlier, really the power of the communities. Working with the communities is one way to mainstream it, because if we work with the communities on the grassroots level, it will actually create ripple effects. One barangay or one community adopting and being conscious or being aware about climate justice, and then spreading it out to nearby neighborhood or communities. That's another way. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, storytelling or campaigning. In Greenpeace, we do have this human library, and we thought it was effective tool because we were able to actually showcase different stories of people who are actually the front lines who felt climate injustices. So with these, because we are human beings, we're emotional, we're rational, we resonate well if we see and hear these kinds of stories, and we tend to act if these stories actually touch our sensibilities or our emotion. So another way perhaps of also mainstreaming it is also engaging politically. I've seen a I've seen a question here. You know, what is our response to people who actually do not believe in activism or doing protests as a means? You don't need to respond to that, you just have to show it. One way actually of educating people is by living by example. You have to, in order for us to actually wanted to have that climate justice, we have to start with ourselves, and then educate our family, within the core, our barangay, our community, and then from that we collectively act then to demand justice, to demand accountability from the governments and corporations, as mentioned by Richard. Over.
Thanks, Asmina. I'll go over to the next question if nobody has anything else to add. This comes from Laurel. She says that she's a Filipino-American participant from the United States. So her question is, how would you suggest I get involved in contributing to and advocating and aiding the Philippines from an international standpoint? Yeah, this is quite a broad question, but I think, is this directed towards Chris or to all the climate activists and break free from plastic activists we have from the Philippines here right now? Okay, so there's no answer from Laurel. Who would want to answer from the Philippines, I believe?
Can you repeat the question? I'm just trying to read the chat.
Wait, I'm getting lost. How would you suggest I get involved, since she's from the US, in contributing to, advocating, and aiding the Philippines from an international standpoint? I guess this pertains to particularly Philippine campaigns like the climate justice, the litigation, the CHR, the justice for the Tumandok massacre victims, etc.
Yeah, I'll try to answer in general as well. For each of the campaigns being presented here, I think there are many platforms for overseas supporters to provide their support. Of course, there are many online petitions that are currently online. You can sign up in their respective petition for plastics, for environmental justice, for climate justice, and for energy transition. In terms of funding, I think there are many platforms as well, and I think that is possible with the individual online platforms of each organization and campaigns.
I don't want to hug the mic, but if I may add also, Kevin, one way really is actually to be involved in social media. You can share, you can show your support to sharing the posts that we create. I mean, the different organizations here, we do have social media platform. We also do. You can also volunteer in the nearby. For example, even if you're in the US, there are NGOs there. There is a presence of Greenpeace USA, which also help us here in the Philippines. Again, like what mentioned by Kevin, we at Greenpeace, we don't receive funding from governments and corporations. So it's really a big help if there will be individual fundings coming from those people who believe in our causes. And also, perhaps one way really is for you to be how do you say it, green activist online. I mean, we need the defenders online because we are being attacked by trolls. For example, our colleagues, like we've heard earlier with Chris, it's so hard if it's so hard for us to be out because we're being attacked by several trolls online. So one way of helping us really is you become our defenders as well, online defenders. So defend the defenders. Over. Richard?
Yeah, I lived in the United States for 20 years, and I know therefore from personal experience that there is a huge Philippine community there. And so you're not isolated, you're not on your own, as I'm sure you're well aware. And there are pressure groups of Filipinos and Filipinas in the United States that you can work with in order to do exactly those things that Hasmina and Kevin have just been talking about. So you're not on your own. Get together, and I'm sure you can have a huge impact, much more than you realize. We used to organize pickets of consulates in New York against all kinds of human rights violations. And you know, those consular staff have nothing to do except write back to their headquarters and say, whoops, we're getting these embarrassing people coming and accusing us of human rights violations. The corporate headquarters. Do you realize that there's a Philippine protest going on in San Francisco against what Pepsi is doing? Whoa. It has an impact far greater than you could imagine. Over.
Thank you.
Hi, Anne.
Go ahead.
Okay. For Laurel Ramirez, thank you for your sympathy, and I think you can support by, for example, organizing support groups there at your end, no? And also by joining us, no, in calling for a stop to the killings and justice for all the victims of human rights violations. And I think the best way to do this simply is through social media. No? Social media is, I think, one of the most popular venue for that. I think that's all I can say for now.
Thank you. Chris, so we have a
Yes.
couple action points for Laurel. I'll move over to the next question from Hezekiah Elizer de la Paz. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Do you believe that it is due to the pandemic, when countries were in lockdown, when nobody can go outside, that this period helped our climate somewhat recover, or at least lessen its effects?
Pardon, Anne?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The question is for our panel from Hezekiah.
Okay.
Do you believe that the lockdown that's happening during the pandemic helped with the climate to recover, or at least lessen the effects of climate change?
Is
Kevin?
this for me?
No, I think it's for our climate activists.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay. Yep. Go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, if I may. Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, and it was actually in many broadsheets that during the first months of the lockdown, a lot of people are thinking that the environment is kind of recovering, and there were even pictures like dolphins being seen in the in the coastline. So there was a misconception there. We actually consider it a misconception, but at the same time, quite revealing also that we see it as an opportunity actually to provide or to provide a glimpse of what is possible. Because during that time, it was actually just a pause. As you can see right now, everything went back to the dirty normal. which is unsustainable, carbon intensive, and um, yeah, requires a lot of resources. So what happened during the lockdown, even until now, is that it provided a glimpse of what is possible, a cleaner air for everyone. You can see people using different modes of mobility beyond the usual gas guzzling transportation that we usually use. But to answer it straightly, it did not help the climate. It was just a pause. Because if we really want to address the climate crisis, we need to do solutions now and for the long run. We do not need a pause. We need a shift of technology, a shift of society towards away from unsustainable practices, away from fossil fuels, away from false solutions on plastics and things like that. So it actually provided us uh, yeah, again, a glimpse, and it should be treated that way, and we need to focus on the solutions, right, that are accessible right now, and we need to do it right now. Okay, over. Sorry, that took quite a while. Over.
If I might add, actually, I read somewhere that we reached 420 ppm of carbon emissions in the middle of the pandemic. It was in April this year. So no, it did not. The pandemic and the lockdowns did not at all arrest the climate emergency that we are having right now. So we have 2 more minutes. I'm sorry. I will take maybe the last question. I'm doing it as I see it in the chat box. So for those whose questions will not be called, we can get back to you. The speakers will get back to you, or the speakers can. I can already see some of our panelists answering directly in the chat box. So last set of questions from Annika. So she has 3 questions. I'll read them all. So first, how can the average Filipino switch to renewable energy? Where can we get resources for this? Number 2, recycling is a myth. What are your thoughts on organizations that accept plastic donations to be repurposed for things such as shelters? Number 3, for the companies with a bad rep that are trying to redeem themselves with green initiatives, how can we know if these are genuine? I think Nico will be the best person to answer these questions.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So, yeah, I can. For number one, it's I guess for Filipinos, especially in Metro Manila, it would be difficult for us to, in a way, ascertain where our electricity comes from. Unfortunately, Meralco still sources a lot of its electricity from fossil fuels. There have been, I think, reforms already where it's not yet in place, but it will be in the future where consumers like us can actually choose where our electricity source can come from. So, for example, I can actually tell Meralco or any electricity distributor that I want my electricity to come from wind or solar, and this is actually happening in other countries, especially in the EU. Number two, about recycling is a myth. So I've answered it in the chat box. So PLAF for the others, it's a startup where they produce or use plastic waste as a feedstock to produce construction or building materials. And I see it as a transitional solution. We're not, in a way, trying to, in a way, oppose them outright, but we need to be careful that these are, in a way, just an option to delay, or because they're just repurposing these waste into building materials, and it will not help us stop the growing need or the growing demand for plastic waste. And as long as we keep producing plastic, even though we have hundred thousands of PLAFs and other initiatives, then they will be overwhelmed with the number of growing volume of plastic. So the real solution here is really to drastically reduce the need for plastic production. And then third, it's very difficult, I guess, especially for the carbon majors. They some have already in a way trying to project themselves as something that loves or wanted to transition to clean energy, but I think, frankly speaking, they might need to, in a way, close their business. For example, if you're in a way a oil company, for example, you might really need to close your business if you, in a way, wanted to in a way transition your work, because the nature of your business is really something that's harmful, not just the environment, but to the survival of humanity.
Okay. So I guess that's all the time we have for the Q&A. You can question or chat the speakers directly if you want, or if there are unresolved questions, the speakers will try to answer it in the chat box. So thank you very much to our speakers as well as to everyone. This is a very engaging, interactive Q&A of the session. We learned a lot of new things that were not in the panel discussion. So before we close, we would love to hear the final messages from each of our speakers. So can you give us one last minute of your time to share with us your parting words or your final message for all of our participants here? We'll start with how we went with the presentation. So we start with Hasmina.
Again, the climate crisis that we are facing today on a daily basis is more than our individual responsibility. I have to stress that. It is a result of deliberate decisions made by the polluting companies, which had early notice and actual knowledge of the harms brought by their products. So we had to change the narrative that big polluters could not be held responsible for the climate change, and that the same laws that help them operate could protect them from the consequences of their actions or omissions or inactions that infringe our basic human rights. So you don't need to be a lawyer to stand up for climate justice. I'm always saying this. We don't need to be a lawyer to stand up for climate justice, for our people, for our planet. You just need eyes that see through injustices, mouth that will carry out the voices of the unheard, a heart that cares for the oppressed, and of course, a hands that will move towards building a better future. Again, it can be done. There is no such thing as David versus Goliath, like our climate justice story, if you are fighting for a good cause. And there's no better cause than the cause for the environment and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you for the very inspirational message. Kevin, your parting words.
Yeah, I'm just thankful to share our messages and our campaigns with the new generations. And I guess my final message is that this is a quite a daunting task, but each and every one of us can have a contribution to the broader objective of climate justice, and to break away from plastics, and of course to uphold the environmental justice for everyone. And the challenge here is that compared to the earlier generations and to other campaigns, that we have a deadline, and everything needs to be done right now within this decade, actually. So with that in mind, we really need to use all our resources, all our available platforms to call for climate justice. And with that, thank you everyone, and hope you have a good day and be inspired from our messages. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Daru, your final message.
Yes. So I believe that youth have the strength, the big power to create change to our future. And some of the youth here asking how to start the activism. So we have to think globally and act locally, persistently and collectively, because this environmental fight for the environment is a long way to go. It's a long-term fighting. It needs strength and stamina and keep high ambition and hope. and start from your own home. Start with your own family, neighborhood, and then wider to the community, to your schools, and to join together to reduce the greenhouse gas emission from our own activity and the pressure to climate and plastic crisis. And learn from the right source of information, so you not get lost to a false solution for climate change and plastic crisis, because there are a lot of fabricated information. We have to be careful to recheck the fact and get the right information from the right source and trusted source. So that's my last message, to the youth. Keep on your fight to defend your environment for our better future. Thank you.
For a very strong parting message, Daru. Miko?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So again, it's just a reminder that other people or other panelists have already discussed or mentioned earlier that we shouldn't sulk about that this problem or this crisis. It's something that uh, difficult to solve by individual actions. Remember that this problem was not caused by me or by Daru or anyone else in this room. It's caused by other people that because of their negligence, even though they already know the harmful effects of these business practices, and we need to, in a way, as individuals, look for circles with common interests, shared interests, to actually get our voices heard. Look for groups, maybe in your community or in your city, so that you can talk more about these topics and make our voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Miko, for that final call to collective action and for accountability. Chris?
Yes, Anna. Uh, uh, I'm being emotional. Sorry, but fighting for our rights is never easy. It's never that easy. Uh, it takes a lot of courage, to do it. Uh, fear may fear may consume us, some of us, but we cannot overcome fear without getting through it. Otherwise, we leave this present and the next generation to come, the spoils of the tyrants, the traitors, and the corrupt. So, what we need is to rise and raise our voices together. I'm always fond of using the line that people united will never be defeated. This is true in many parts of the world. This is true with the Filipino people. We have a share to it. Let us all have a share towards making a society where human rights are enjoyed by everyone without fear of being persecuted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for the heartfelt message. We all stand with you in the struggle, in solidarity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
Thank you. I am now officially 20 years younger than I was 2 hours ago. Thank you all for such an inspiring time together. I'm inspired particularly by Kevin's comment. What we need is not a pause, but a shift. For those of you living in Metro Manila, in Jakarta, you know that the air quality in your cities has not dramatically suddenly improved thanks to COVID. However, you see these huge skyscrapers full of accountants and advertising agencies and bloody lawyers. We've got a new working normal. We don't need those skyscrapers with those people driving and polluting the roads, going to these huge, great offices. We've been, so many of us, working on a completely different normal, and that's just a start. We can begin to hold the climate criminals to account, not just for what they're doing in Singapore, in Thailand, in Indonesia, in the Philippines. We can hold them to account in their head offices in London, in Amsterdam, in Berlin. And when I hear people say, what, you mean I've got to fight for my entire life? All I can say is, what's the purpose of life? What are you living for? But you can have fun as well while you're doing it. Thanks, everyone.
Wow. So thank you so much for the inspirational words, for the love, for the support from our audience, and from the very strong and inspirational inputs from our panelists. Actually, I did not expect to feel this emotional at the end of our session. So let's take the time after this session to reflect on what we have learned, formulate our action plans and our commitments moving forward. So right now, we will be flashing the link. Our organizers have created a Canva template, which our tech-savvy youth can use and customize and post. It was mentioned earlier about social media posts. Post your social media accounts. Don't forget to add the hashtags. Hashtag climate justice now, hashtag defend the defenders, hashtag break free from plastics. There. And I guess this is the end of our program for today. Thank you to everyone who attended, who actively participated, who shared their insights, their questions, and of course to all our panelists who gave us really strong messages and deep dives into the different issues we are facing, especially on climate justice, energy transition, break free from plastic, and the defense of environmental and human rights defenders campaigns. Just a reminder, so this is only the second day of our 3-day human rights strategy workshop. We will be having our third and most exciting and interactive session with a surprise in store for everyone. At the same time, tomorrow, using the same Zoom room or the same link to go into Zoom. So once again, I am Anna from the Asia Pacific Network of Environment Defenders. If you're interested to participate or know more about solidarity campaigns or know more about environmental defenders, connect with us at the channels posted right now on the slide. So see you all tomorrow. Goodbye. Thank you. Hugs to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.